Welcome to The Creative Influencer, where we discuss all things creative with an emphasis on influencers. The Creative Influencer is hosted by John Pfeiffer. John is an entertainment attorney in Santa Monica, California, who represents influencers and other creatives.
Welcome back. This is Minisode 2 of the 8th season of the Creative Influencer podcast, and it's the 6th installment in our ongoing series on influencer brand agreements. If you've been following along, you know we've covered some critical ground already. In our last Minisode, we dove into the world of deliverables, detailing what you're required to create and post as part of your brand partnership. Today, we're going to discuss something closely related, the creative brief, the twin sister of deliverables. A creative brief is essentially a blueprint written by the brand, laying out all of the key elements of how they want their product or message represented. It's like a roadmap for your content creation, making sure the brand's voice, message, and visual identity remain consistent across all of their marketing efforts, including your work as an influencer. The creative brief will typically contain a mix of mandatory requirements, creative direction, and technical details. It may specify the following: exact brand names or product names to use in your content, specific hashtags or tags that must be included in the posts, mandatory phrases or key messages that need to be communicated, such as slogans or marketing angles, trademark information to ensure brand logos, names, and other intellectual property are used correctly and consistently, brand colors, fonts, and aesthetics to maintain visual consistency. Essentially, the creative brief helps align your content with the brand's goals and images. But as we'll get into, it's also where a lot of influencers stumble. So, while the deliverables outline what you need to do, the creative brief tells you how to do it. Think of it like a set of instructions from the brand to guide your content creation. This is not an area for creativity to run wild. This is where you have to stay on brand. Ignoring the creative brief can result in more than just a slap on the wrist. If you veer too far from the guidelines, your content may be rejected, requiring reshoots or revisions. This can lead to delays, additional work, and worst of all, possible payment holds. Remember, if your content doesn't match what the brand requested, they're within their rights to withhold payment until it meets their expectations. So here's the thing. Many influencers get tripped up when they don't follow the creative brief to the letter. And honestly, I get it. As an influencer, your creativity is your currency. You likely built your following because of your unique voice, aesthetic, and approach. But when it comes to brand collaborations, you must find a balance between your creative freedom and the rigid guidelines of the creative brief. Now, there are 4 common pitfalls. First is missing mandatory elements. One of the most common mistakes is skipping over small but crucial details, like forgetting to include a specific hashtag or not using the exact product name the brand specified. These might seem like minor issues, but they're major red flags for the brand. The second pitfall is going off-brand. Another common issue is creating content that doesn't align with the brand's aesthetic or tone. If the creative brief asks for clean, minimalist visuals, don't go all out with wild, maximalist designs. Even though that might be your personal style, it's not what the brand is paying for. Third is missing trademark or logos. Improperly using brand trademarks or logos or product names can get you into legal trouble. Make sure you're following the exact instructions in the brief, especially when it comes to intellectual property. For example, using an outdated logo or misspelling a product name can not only damage the brand's image, but may also breach the agreement with the brand. The last is not following the brand's tone. The creative brief often contains rigid talking points or messages the brand once conveyed. If the brief says to emphasize the product's eco-friendly aspects, make sure you highlight that. Don't go off on a tangent about something unrelated. Staying on message is critical. So, how do you make sure you don't fall into these traps? The answer is simple. Read the creative brief carefully, several times if needed. Here are a few key tips to help you navigate it successfully. Flag important sections. Go through the brief and highlight any required phrases, hashtags, and product mentions. I always advise my clients to make a checklist of mandatory elements before creating content. Next, ask for clarification. If any part of the brief is unclear, don't hesitate to ask the brand or your contact for clarification. It's much better to ask up front than to deliver content that misses the mark. Next, keep a copy on hand. While you're creating content, keep the brief nearby so you can cross-reference it and ensure you're hitting all the required points. Finally, stay organized. If you're working on a large campaign with multiple deliverables, keep track of everything in a spreadsheet or product management tool. Make sure you can check off each element of the brief for each piece of content. Now, if you feel like the creative brief is overly restrictive or clashes with your content style, don't be afraid to bring it up in the negotiation phase. Many brands are open to feedback, and there might be some wiggle room to adjust certain guidelines while still maintaining the brand's objectives. However, once the agreement's signed, those creative brief instructions are usually set in stone. So, final thoughts. The creative brief is an essential document in every influencer brand partnership. It sets clear expectations on how your content should look, feel, and sound. While it might feel limiting at times, following it closely ensures you meet the brand's goals and, more importantly, that you get paid for your work. In our next minisode, we'll take a closer look at content submission and reviews, how brands approve the final product. But for now, stay focused on those briefs.
That's it for this time. If you enjoyed our podcast, please write a review on iTunes and tell your friends to subscribe. If you have any questions about influencers or suggestions for future episodes, email them to John at Pfeiffer@pfeifferlaw.com. Thank you for listening.